in smaller groups, and then open it up for a wider discussion. So anyway, I'm talking too much, so Maria, please.
Do I read this?
Yeah.
Okay. And you will have to stop me at some point if I go on forever, yeah? So, hello. Thank you for inviting me. I have notes. All the time I make notes about what I'm going to talk about, and then I never look at the notes and I come up with something else. Sorry, we won't have time to discuss more at the end because I have to go. But let me start saying a few things about the situation in Greece and where Syriza came to being government now. So first of all, let me start by saying that these days I have started to have a very big problem with what we call the traditional left. And the problem I have with the traditional left is their inability to see that you cannot go all the time with your Marxism and your Leninism and shove it up people's face. But we have to be able to talk to different groups of people, diverse groups of people, leave the canon aside and start creating something much broader. And I think this is what Syriza managed to do. I think this is what Podemos managed to do. And I think this is the case of Scotland as well, in a way that I will try to conceptualize. So first, in 2011, almost 4 years before now, we had the movement of the indignance in Greece. In Greece, it's called the Anarchismeni. We copied the Spanish experience. So 10 days after we had the similar demonstrations in Greece, the same thing started in Greece, Athens, and it developed in many different, all different cities around Greece. The interesting thing about this type of protests, it was that they were very broad and very diverse. So we had very different groups coming together, groups that they didn't necessarily belong neither to the traditional left, nor only people which had a previous experience from movements. It was almost everybody. And they were coming to the big squares in Athens and in the other cities with many different grievances actually, but it was expressed in this motto which this conference has, they don't represent us. So effectively what happened is that when in Greece they felt that the people realized that we were to be subjected under lending mechanisms that imposed severe austerity measures in Greece, they started being afraid. Well, they were feeling it. The pensions were cut, the wages were cut, people didn't know what would be the future of their children, everything was starting to be privatized, and it was going on like that. So different grievances, different, very diverse groups started to come to the main squares in Greece. The main demand, it was that they don't represent us, and this referred to the old political establishment. And the idea was that the previous affiliations that a lot of these people had with the main political parties had weakened at that point. And then there was a demand from part of these movements for direct democracy. Now, direct democracy sounds good. It creates horizontal organizations. It tries to avoid hegemony and verticality and so on. But it is very difficult to be expressed on another political side, on the term of electoral politics. This is why when these debates were happening in the squares in Athens, and they were talking about direct democracy and horizontal organization, some of us we were thinking, yeah, this is great, but probably horizontality needs an element of verticality at the same time. So at some point, probably not on the grassroots level, on another political side, on the electoral political side, we will need some form of representation, some form of hegemony. An actor, a political actor that it will manage to express the similar demands, but on that different level. So for me, horizontality and verticality, they are not exclusive of one another. And I can still say that we can work in a different way on the grassroots level, create more horizontal, more engaging and equal forms of organization, but I do insist that we will need to express hegemony on the electoral level. I think this is what happened in Scotland. I think the same happened in Spain as well with Podemos. Now, after this is a very nice music. What is it?
Quite embarrassing.
Come on, calm down.
It wasn't very revolutionary. So we have this big protest in Greece, and after 2 or 3 months, of course, there was a lot of violence from the side of the police as well. The protest started to decide. This doesn't mean that everything disappeared. A lot of that was expressed later on in grassroots movements, which we call them solidarity networks. Different smaller or bigger organization on the level of different neighborhoods, different cities, where people, and again, it wasn't the traditional people of the left necessarily, it was them and other people uniting without their political ideas and without shoving Marxism one to the other's face. But they were coming together to create social clinics, food banks, social kitchens, and so on. So creating structures that they will help the people who were most affected from the crisis. And this was very important because a lot of people in Greece, about 2.5 million, they didn't have even access to any healthcare. So if you were not working, after a point, you didn't have any access to healthcare. So in the social clinics, effectively, you had volunteers, but they were coming together and trying to offer something to these people. But it wasn't charity, or the way I understand charity. It was solidarity, which means that by entering into these structures, you have a much more active involvement in politics. It is where you start feeling empowered, where you say, fuck off, you bastards, we are here, we will organize it, we will provide. This is not something that we see as something that it will be instead of the provisions of the state, but in that point, bringing people together in order to provide for those in more need, but at the same time radicalizing people. So this was happening on one level, but on the other level that I was talking about, on the electoral level, after this protest, Syriza started to gain a lot of power. So before 2012, which was one of our elections, in 2009, for example, Syriza had 4% of the vote. Syriza was different small leftist groups, but that's the vote they had, 4%. 2012, it grows to 27% with the European election. And then in January 2015, Syriza comes to power with 36% of the vote. So it will be very naive to assume that all these people turn Marxist. I would like to be able to say so, but I think people will laugh at me. It was that Syriza did something that we have to do on different countries today as well, is without limiting its discourse, trying to show how that a lot of these demands of these people, they could be expressed through the program of Syriza. And a lot of diverse groups, very different people, started to vote for Syriza. They didn't turn Marxist from one to the other. So what does this tell me? It is that when we are thinking, and I think this is the challenge that we have today, and I don't mean only in Greece, is that we have to start thinking of how we can work on different levels. You cannot have only the level of the movements which stays outside parliamentary politics. You cannot have parliamentary politics that it doesn't have any grassroots and it doesn't want to connect with the movements. And we have to start thinking how we bring these different levels together and how us we create this type of links. Actually, I believe it's not only these two levels, there are more levels. There is the level of the movement and the grassroots, then there is a party. What is happening, for example, in Syriza as a party, it's quite different of Syriza and the government that we have today. And of course there is another dimension as well, which is the transnational dimension. Again, something that we have to work and bring different voices and different struggles together. I can tell you now that the people in Greece understand Scotland. Probably they understand Scotland much better than any English people will. It's after the elections, I'm a bit depressed. But they do understand what it means, although there were different things happening. For us, it was the Eurozone structures that they were imposing severe austerity on Greece, and we were, although we were supposed to be partners, we were not partners, we were the slaves of this relationship, and we didn't have sovereignty, and they were shoving their measures on us. And I think something similar we can say for Scotland. Although it's not about European Union, but British Parliament. And again, you see a partnership there, but it is not really an equal partnership. So we have common things and common understandings, and I think it will be very important to bring them together, as it will be very important to bring together different campaigns. Water, the campaign for water. Similar case in Greece, in Thessaloniki, with the privatization of water. So there are certain elements that we have to start bringing together and create something much bigger and make each one of these campaigns or these struggles our own campaign in order to create something that it will run across Europe. In my case, I would like to see it extended much further than that. That's why I talked in Turkey or Latin America and so on. So for me, the first thing is to start thinking of these different levels and how we can bring them together. It is not very easy. What we see with Syriza is that the moment we pay too much attention on electoral politics, we forget to create the necessary grassroots structures that we need them as Syriza, as government, to support us. So we are not doing it that way. We say we came out of the movement, but the moment we are there, we forget that now we don't have the structures that they are going to support us, because the situation and with the negotiations is quite difficult. We need to think of this type of organizations and how these different organizations will work in the base. We need to think how we construct a people which will allow diverse groups and their grievances to be expressed in there without this Marxist necessarily canon. And we have to be prepared to work with these people. You cannot say, I mean, there are still groups that they say this. This is the problem that I have these days. Oh, but this is not leftist enough. We would prefer to work with the people that they're real revolutionaries. Good. Take your revolutionaries, go to the pub, have a pint, but this doesn't mean much about how we are involved and how we change politics. So, from my view, this is something else that we have to think, how we create a people and how we bring these different struggles together. And I think I can shut up now. Thank you.
Thank you for incorporating us and still managing to go to Manchester as well. Right, so next we have Shane. Sorry? All right. We've got Shane, who's going to speak as well for 15 minutes. Broderick's provided with us a lovely example of why you need your phone on silent. And if I hear another one, I will confiscate it and you have to get back to it today. With that in mind, Shane.
My problem was with the music. It wasn't.
Thank you, man. How's it going? My name is Shane. I'm an activist in Ireland, based in Dublin. There, just outside it, if anyone knows. I think I have a difficult accent and I might speak fast and mumble.
You didn't say that
Block guy in Frankfurt in November, and it did a big whole session, and I just burst into really excited talk about the movement in Ireland, and afterwards the whole room stopped, and the person in the corner said, sorry, I understood 80% of that. There was about 12 people the whole thing where English was their national language and their native language, and I was the only person who needed a translator, so let me know. I've been an activist since about 2010. Ireland, as people might forget sometimes, actually, was the second country to be bailed out, the second of the bigs after Greece, just a few months afterwards. Ireland experienced kind of one of those neoliberal booms from the 80s into the 2000s. It kind of stumbled a bit around 2001 with the global crash there, and it really funneled then into a housing bubble, speculative bubble, as it was before, but more so now. There was talk of Ireland had this, booming export sector, loads of jobs being created. Well, actually, it was a myth. All this foreign direct investment basically meant nothing. It was all being washed into Ireland's status as a tax haven. Ireland's a structural role in the international economy where it all gets washed in and washed out. So Apple are based there, Facebook are based there, Google are based there, purely just to wash their money. To really create money jobs. So when the crash came, we had about 30 years or 20 something years, my lifetime anyway, of basically social peace or industrial peace, not much struggle going on. And the left had been quite emaciated. The Republican movement from the north had been defeated, walked into a strange British state. And there was not much to go on. So the twin pillars of the Irish left would be the SPP, the Irish section, and the SP, CDY as well. They're kind of equal enough size, but coming into it both quite small. So the first thing that people did when it came to the crash was just panic. Basically, everything just really suddenly came crashing down and around our heads. We had, I think, one of the largest property bubble collapses in the world ever. The state just was bankrupt overnight. It made a ridiculous decision to guarantee all funds that went through Ireland, this being the place that's an international tax haven, so a lot of money gets thrown in there. And that then kind of fed into the whole collapse of the construction industry. A lot of people working in construction, and basically then people are left with huge debts. The state doesn't have the revenue. It's kind of the same everywhere, but at a much maybe exaggerated scale in Ireland. The deficits were about 12%, like within weeks. I remember, like, as I'm kind of relatively young, like I remember the radio every week, 1,000 jobs lost here, 1,000 jobs lost there, and it's a small country. To get the equivalent scale, I think just multiplied by 10. So things were bad, and eventually the debt climbed to 125 to 20% of GDP, which itself was distorted. 20% of it was really just fake money that's not legitimate. So I'm kind of giving the background to us coming into the crisis, because we could say it's the water struggle, it's the water movement, but there's more things going on. There's the kind of regeneration of struggle and the structures and power of our side, and reforming what that is, what that looks like, and their side too. So there was my first, I think, project I remember was in October 2010, and there was, Marina's still here, something that really stuck with us was that after the IMF came in, there was protests in Greece, and Ireland, that's just kind of, we had social partnership, we hadn't really gone through destroying our Labour Party yet or whatever, so there wasn't much protest, there wasn't much infrastructure to mobilise a proper resistance at the time. And there was some news footage of a protest in Greece of people marching down the street with banners saying, "We're not Ireland, we're Greece, we will fight back." And that just stung. We've been like that for years. So like, a bit of revenge, got a bit of revenge. But there had been like an initial burst where people went to like the radical left, and the radical left had some campaigns. There was a student movement. When your student movement is up, then ours quickly follows. So keep at it. Yeah, there was a United Left Alliance formation between the SVP and SP and a couple of people in between, and it very quickly collapsed, acrimoniously, awfully sectarian, like war has been going on since between the two. And we had one kind of semi-mass campaign against the household charge, like the poll tax, here in the early 90s. And we lost. They used the power of the state to just reach in, take out wages and everything. Then we were in a really bad situation, basically, coming into start of last year. we had one MEP for Dublin, Paul Murphy, if anybody is familiar with him, good young Gapscut, the SP, and the SLP decided to run against Paul Murphy in the election, basically removing any chance of the left, the anti-capital left holding that seat. And it was just a really bad time. We were getting our ass handed to us up and down the street. But then something kind of happened. Resistance starts coming from new places that we hadn't seen before. Like says no groups, the kind of anti-political populist, but working class and rural too groups start kind of emerging spontaneously, kind of outside of our experiences. And the water meters. So part of the Troika package was that they would get commercialised water and eventually privatising. So before it had been run by the council, you just don't pay for water, you just have water. It's great. It's paid out of central taxation, but you didn't pay for usage. So that they have to put meters into about 2 million houses. So they have to, it's quite a big operation. So they have to go into every estate, dig up your driveway, put one in, and these people obviously were just, pissed off and not going to take it. So they use this confrontation, basically IMF, the bank bailout, coming right to your doorstep. It was the perfect kind of kindling or whatever for explosion. And it started in Cork, so the meters were being put in, and like in the working class estate, working class community, no real left presence, organised left presence, and the locals kind of came out and said no, pushed them back, surrounded the estate, wouldn't let them in. And then this tactic was kind of developed. Communities in other areas see this, and it starts getting copied in North East Dublin, in Limerick, anyone knows Irish geography. And it very quickly kind of starts to slowly starts to generalise. Because we had been at a low ebb as this kind of kicked off. I forgot to mention as well, it's kind of important, at the end of the previous year, in 2012, if anyone remembers, Sylvia Hannah, woman Indian origin, died because she couldn't get an abortion because Ireland's a Catholic country, she was told, and we would ban abortion. But that kind of peters out, that huge, really quick, sudden, young, vibrant movement kind of goes into abeyance once it partially achieves legislative change. But anyway, so we're coming to this, and there's nothing going on, and there's an election, local election in May, like European elections, and Paul loses his seat, but the radical left kind of, in its fragments, uses that to almost kind of regroup and consolidate a bit in their own individual elections. And we do surprisingly, undeservingly well. The Labour Party got absolutely trashed. They have no councillors left in the second city of the country. They have, I think, 2 or 3 in Dublin City Council. From basically the non-establishment parties in Ireland control, or have a majority, but don't control Dublin City Council. So that Sinn Féin got elected independence, but not the old party to say. So we kind of came out of that. How did that happen? Right? And you can see things start to change in different levels, I suppose. Because straight away after the election is the Gaza protests, and Sinn Féin have just become substantially strengthened by the results. And Ireland has a good anti-imperialist history, really strong Palestinian solidarity, and suddenly protests starts back again for the first time in a couple of years. In small towns and villages, people go and have protests. They go into the Tesco, put all the oranges in the basket and leave it out, or bring it to the manager to push the BDS. We have protests every Wednesday and Saturday for a month in Dublin, and across the country. And some of them are about 20,000. So 20,000 is like the magic number that we try to kind of hit. It's a really crude way of measuring it, but we would get that like once a year, maybe twice a year, and then that has the opportunity to shape things at a mainstream level, and then there might be a cascade after that. But we were getting that like every week for like a month, and with the help of Sinn Féin, I suppose. And then there was the Greyhound protest as well. So in Ireland there's really strict anti-union laws. You can't have any kind of effective protest. And the main chunk of the trade union movement, SIB2, the one that Larkin and Connolly founded, spinning in their graves, powering electricity for every house. They were really tied to the Labour Party, who are now in government as the junior party to the post-fascist party. That they're getting obliterated, but there's kind of like a gap kind of starting to open up, because as saying to people earlier on, that Unite the Union, I think, is the biggest here. They're not the biggest in Ireland, but they disaffiliated from the Labour Party in 2012. And 2013, they kind of test out endorsing candidates of the radical left, and not Sinn Féin. I think they went to Sinn Féin. That's separate, but this Greyhound is bin workers, and the bins have been privatised about 10 years beforehand in the previous cycle like that, which we lost. But it was really kind of hard fought when we actually go out, and so the bins will be coming into different estates, so we'd organise communities to kind of get out and block them, and not let them in with the scabs. I mean, obviously there's a lockout on, and you kind of see that they were organised in SIP to the main union, but the workers came to find they were really just completely ineffective, completely useless. Is this being recorded? So the other smaller unions and good militants in them kind of came out with the workers, stood in the front line. The president of Congress is in one of the smaller unions, John Douglas. He was out on the front lines, preventing the trucks from coming in. So kind of, and then there's Migrant Y, actually. So in Ireland, you can't get an abortion, you have to have X, Y, Z reasons, but basically they just tell you to fly to England. I think 40,000 women in the last 20 years. There's no, sorry, 400,000 in the last, since the 80s, have to go to England to access an abortion. But if you can't, if you're an undocumented person, you can't leave the country, you can't go through Germany. So there have been all these scandals every couple of months, something blows up, and it's just the need for access to abortion rights kind of pops up. But anyways, a woman who was a migrant, she undocumented, in direct division, basically a place where the state locks up asylum seekers indefinitely. Not time to get into that, but it's horrendous. So that sparks up the Choice campaign again. So we're getting into September now, last year, and now the meter blockages are everywhere. People are active in their protesting, and there's like street meetings in every town, every borough, every city. There's groups forming themselves, anti-water charges groups, and United Front that happened convened in April, kind of not really sure where it was going to go, called Right to Water. That's the other anti-protestation in Europe is backed by the five smaller radical trade unions, and they call a protest for and the radical left tension. They call a protest for October 1st. And we were expecting about 20,000 people. It was kind of the anti-budget one too, starting budget, and turned out that there was 100,000 more people than we expected. They had 30 stewards to marshal the 20,000 the route was supposed to go down a very small little route around the GPO, down Pelham Bridge and back, but it went back about 5 kilometres. It was absolutely enormous. So we'd never, we've seen a protest that size in 2010, which was a downhill one. We've seen one in the anti-war movement, and then the last one before that was the late 70s, and then before that was the War of Independence, the Irish Revolution. So it was just really unbelievable, comparative moment that after all these hard years of fighting and struggle and getting absolutely nowhere, that all these networks that you'd built up over the previous years and suddenly you've been activated like a lightning rod. Everyone just suddenly poured out into the streets, and there was unbelievable kind of creativity and joy. And I think that might make it distinct that it's been very traditionally working class, the movement. I know in 15M or so, there's a lot of student and youth mobilisation. There's not that really, outside of the Choice movement in Ireland. We've had huge admiration. I'm actually involved in the campaign here, We're Not Leaving. It's about kind of politicising and problematizing the mass immigration. So since 2006, the height of the bubble, 1 in every 10 people who've fill out the census have emigrated. That's not including people coming in, but we've lost a hell of a lot of people. Mostly young, 70% of them early. But anyway, the unions kind of roll on the push with it. People are getting energised and they're feeding off of it. There's more groups popping up, there's more resistance. And the next day of action is called, and it's just simple, so it's just like a national day of local action. And there's protests in every small town, every village. So in my county, Kildare is really where I'm from. There's about 7 big towns, between 10,000 and 20,000, a couple of them. And we got protests in each of those towns, and 1 in 20 people living in the county was out on a protest that day, man, woman, and child. And like this is replicated across the country, and it's mostly self-organised. It's completely overwhelmed the left in terms of scale. The left, there's probably, I don't know, 1,500 activists, say, and you know, the protests in my hometown of 20,000 people, 1,000 people out. There's not too many lefties there, you know. So it's really tapped into this thing that's just erupted. So the government instantly are just panicking, they're back, they're collapsing. They're going, oh, we'll give you this concession, this concession. They're getting wiped out in the opinion polls. Well, not wiped out, sorry, they're getting severely pushed back. Labour are on the verge of being not existing anymore. The next election, they'll lose all their seats. They have no agents left. They have no few councillors, no MEPs. We're really on the verge of it. SIP2 down the main trade union are being pushed into, or pulled into even, this struggle, which they had been staying back because Labour wanted to push it through. So then they were like, okay, well, go on the protest, and you know, they shouldn't be privatised. Concessions are good, we want more concessions. And then that's huge. So about 200,000 people across the country, more, maybe 250,000. We're not sure because we don't know where every protest was. We tried to get it together on the spreadsheet, but then on December 10th they called another protest, the third in 3 months. And this was on a Wednesday afternoon just before Christmas, and it was bloody cold. And about 80,000 people showed up, which is like phenomenal from all over the country. People just like left work. It was, the idea of it is you go to lunch and not come back. So it was the unions kind of taking really militant action. And then we had another one, yes, on January 21st by communities called it. The communities are all these grassroots groups, not the trade unions and not the political parties. There's been a kind of an artificial kind of divide put in there, but anyway, it exists. And 30,000 came out in January is where Jonas came over to report back on it. Then the state comes back with this repressive, you know, apparatus that we haven't really seen in the South before. They lock up politicians, they arrest. Like on Sunday, the headline of the newspaper was they're breaking the law, arrest them or something. Someone in Irish Water said, you know, if you break the law, why aren't they being arrested? The next day, it's leaked that 40 people are going to be arrested in a raid over 2 weeks, 6 a.m. raids in houses where a minister had been delayed in her car. And I think 5 politicians get locked up before, and basically it gets a bit violent, and then the state locks up 4 people for like 3 months. So there's a protest called by the community just instantly responds to all of this. They all assemble, or we all assemble even in Dublin, and we march in a new route we never had done before, right across the city to Mountjoy, if anyone knows any Dubliners songs. And there's about 20,000 people at that. Suddenly, quick, instant mobilisation. March 21st, another big one, Right to Water one, another 80,000 people. By this time, the self-activity was kind of lulled a bit. I wasn't sure how much of that was like the winter, but it was huge. And then there was another one on April 21st in the Bills, and which is called by the right to left, basically. The SP was their periphery, but they're quite strong in the movement. And then, so the unions have kind of moved to kind of demobilise and try and filter into elections. And there's not kind of a grassroots structure to kind of keep going with the grassroots mobilisations, and all this stuff needs to get done. So they're moving into that. They have a thing called a platform for renewal, where they're intending to try and put together a left government in time. There's going to be a general election within 12 months, which will be on the centenary of the 1916 Rising, which creates this beautiful narrative that's like organic in the movement, that people see 1922 and the foundation of the state, the counter-revolution. Like everyone just sees it as a counter-revolution, and this is what we were supposed to have done, and that they want to kind of push it on and just clear them all out. It's really interesting how that kind of parallels maybe with other ones. But that's where we are now, and basically this past 12 months has been probably the biggest psychological struggle we've had since, if not, the War of Independence, then certainly since the 70s. So things are really moving and bubbling and dynamic across all sectors, not just the water. And there's new fronts opening up in housing and possibly the student movement and the LGBTQ kind of movement, trans movement. It's really going on, so it's really good and hopeful. But it's not like that
about host, and I haven't given anybody water. Would you like some more water? You sure? Okay, all right. Okay, so it's all yours now. Thank you.
Thanks very much for inviting me. I want to. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to start by bringing a message of solidarity from everyone in the Radical Independence campaign. We will stand by your side, on the side of every ordinary person across the UK who wants to fight this government, and we will do everything in our power to make their term unsustainable. I want to just start by saying there can be no doubt Scotland has changed forever, but that process of change started well before Thursday's historic election result, where Labour were rooted out of the seats that they thought they had the right to rule in Scotland. Radical independence, now what radical independence is, it was started when the referendum was first on the table, when the SNP were elected overwhelmingly Holyrood. And it was started by socialists, community campaigners, anti-cuts activists, disaffected trade unionists, some people in political parties, some people in the Labour Party were involved, some people from the SNP were involved, but also a lot of people who'd never been involved in politics before. And what we wanted to do was build a campaign where we could go out and convince people to vote yes, not because they were Scottish and not because Alex Salmond was telling them to, but in fact that it was a chance to transform our lives. It was a chance to break with neoliberalism and the history of empire. And we went out and took that message into our working class communities that had been ignored by both Holyrood and by Westminster. And we had what are the so-called highest debates in politics in those communities, because that's what people wanted to talk about. They wanted to talk about Trident, they wanted to talk about the war in Iraq, the economy, corruption. Radical independence and the broad left campaign for yes played such a huge role in this transformation of Scotland, because it was in those communities that were in the Labour heartlands of the central belt of Scotland that we grew a radical base. And if you've seen the map of the referendum results and the areas that voted yes, Glasgow, Dundee, Western Bartonshire, North Lanarkshire, these places have been delivering Labour MPs, MSPs and councils for generations. Our message was that independence was a class issue and it was the rich that were voting no. And radical independence as well, part of the reason that we set it up was out of a genuine frustration with the official Yes campaign, because when it was first launched, the big Yes Scotland piece, their message was, vote yes, and don't worry, you can keep the Queen, you can keep the pound. Vote yes, nothing's going to change, you can still be governed by a monarch and the Bank of England. That was the opposite of what we wanted. Our whole movement, that radical independence, I think, seized leadership of that broad left campaign for yes, has pulled the SNP to the left as well. I mean, before the referendum, you would have pictures of Alex Salmond with his arm around Rupert Murdoch. You would have him with Donald Trump. That is unimaginable now. And that is because of the campaign that we ran for 2 years. We've also changed the culture of the left in Scotland. We brought together disparate groups who had worked together for a very, very long time, but we also energised a whole new generation of activists. And although we didn't win the referendum, we've won something quite spectacular, because the community campaign inside of what we did, the horizontal structures of RIC, meant that all of the meetings that happened up and down Scotland that were organised within community bases, people went along to meetings night after night after night, and when they left, they went home and they read books about Scotland, they read articles, they read about the history of the oil sector, they read about stock markets, they read so much. This process of genuine working class self-education has created a politically aware and astute population in Scotland, and that's the thing that the elites are always most afraid of. And we proved, Scotland's got some of the lowest voter turnout records in Europe, and we proved that when our vote actually matters, we will turn up in our millions to participate in deciding our own future. And we proved tenacity as well. The entire might of the British establishment was against us, and we didn't crumble, we didn't crack, we didn't fall into sectarian debates. We stood firm and strong, and we held our ground and continued with our campaign. And everything that's happened last Thursday is a consequence of that. Scotland has voted overwhelmingly against austerity, but really, I know that people in Scotland aren't that different from the voters here. We've just become used to countering the politics of fear, because for over 700 days we were told that if we dared to vote yes, we would lose our jobs, our homes, our pensions, our livelihoods. And still 1.6 million people did it anyway. They stood up to the murdered press, they stood up to the lies of the establishment. It was an act of genuine ambition instead of apprehension. And on Thursday, just passed, the remaining majority of Labour activists and politicians who hadn't quite realised it until that point finally accepted that they had lost all credibility as Scotland's Social Democratic Party. This is by no means unique to Scotland. What's happening in Glasgow and Dundee is part of what's happening all across Europe. In 2008, the Social Democratic parties who had signed up to neoliberalism were left without answers when the crisis came. And Labour across the UK is suffering the same fate as its sister parties in Europe. And Labour, throughout that election campaign, absolutely failed to destroy the lie that public spending caused the crisis. That left them rudderless, it left them unable to build a coherent anti-austerity narrative. And now, when they reshuffle their leadership, it will be fully to the right. And we see that already. Red Ed went too far. We need modernisers in the party. The collapse of that Social Democratic Party all across Europe is allowing for the emergence of populist politics. And combined with organisation and imagination, we can reframe the political debate. And of course, those politics and that type of movement can take two forms. It can take ugly forms, like the National Front, like UKIP, but it can take positive forms, like Radical Independence, or Podemos, or Syriza. So for us in Scotland, we're seeing that the independence referendum snapped open a stale and tribal politics, and that the popular movement that emerged was to the left. The challenge for us now is to make sure that that type of populist left movement has a radical left expression at the ballot box in Scotland in 2016. Otherwise, we might lose to the populist right, or we might fall back into a tribal politics where it's Labour versus the SNP day after day. I'll start summing up now, because I know I've probably been talking for quite a long while. There is a difference, and it's quite an important difference, between what's happening in Europe and what's happened in Scotland. Because the main parties that are benefiting in Europe from left-wing populist movements have more leftist traditional roots than the SNP. I can't really imagine the Demos routinely arming the police or advocating cuts in corporation tax, for example. At the end of the day, the SNP are social liberals. They're anxious about redistribution of wealth. They're really weak on nationalisation. Our job is now to ensure that the social movement that pulled them to the left in the first place keeps them there and holds them to account. And secondly, building that radical left alternative in the ballot box in Scotland in 2016. Because in an era of the bedroom tax, the welfare cap, another 5 years of Tory government, we could all do really well to learn from Syriza's campaign slogan that hope is coming. And the seeds of that hope right now are growing quickly in Scotland, and I hope that you will offer your solidarity to our project in the north as well. Thank you.